Okay, we're recording. My name is Hilary Stoupa, and I am a developer with Qdabra software and also an InfoPath MVP. But today, I'm not here to talk to you so much about InfoPath as I am to talk to you about some reporting ideas on data. If you've been developing forms, you've been collecting data. If you've been working with InfoPath, there's a very good chance you've also been working with SharePoint, which is another great way to capture user data. So by this point, you likely have quite a bit of data. And we need to talk about aggregating and exposing that data in order for it to be of the most value to you. So just our webinar basics here, our goals. We try to help you out if you're maybe in a little over your head, or maybe help you think through some of the possibilities available to you that you haven't seen. We talk a little bit about techniques. I'm going to stick pretty high level today, but we're going to have available for you some deep dive information. We've got a set of 5 documents walking through some of the things I'm going to just sort of skate over in this presentation. So you're going to have access to those details. Just need to contact us and we'll get you that information. So InfoPath makes data collection easy. SharePoint makes data collection easy. Reporting can be a little harder, especially if you're dealing with repeating data in an InfoPath form. And I spoke about that earlier this month when we talked about methods for getting that data out of those repeating sections. If your data is flattened out into SharePoint lists or SQL tables, you start to get some more reporting options. And you know, I mean, we all understand that the data is not truly flat, it's connected and related. So flattening out that form data, we've got different options. We talked about them at the beginning of May in our webinar. You can flatten things out to lists using you know, Q rules or your own camel or your own code. You can send things out to data tables. The important thing is really whatever methodology you take, if you have repeating data or nested repeating data inside of an InfoPath form, in order to do effective reporting, you're going to most likely need to get it out of there. There are ways and tools for reporting off of the XML directly, but they tend to be pretty complex, and it's oftentimes simpler just to get your data flattened out. So reporting options for SharePoint lists. The one we're probably most familiar with is creating views just within the list itself. You just go into the list's settings and you can create some views right there. You have no doubt got some SharePoint users who are very competent and capable in this, and they create their own views all the time, and those views can be, you know, personal, or they can be shared, and so that's one way to do things. And you can also create custom views using SharePoint Designer, and you can, in a custom view in SharePoint Designer, you can link a couple of lists together in order to at least, you know, display linked data, because as we talked about at the beginning of May, and as you know, most of your data isn't just a little island of items. It's connected, right? Lists are connected to each other, customers to orders, orders to details. Another great option for reporting on SharePoint lists is Excel. And if you have not checked out Excel since, you know, 2003 or even 2007, I really encourage you to check out what Excel has available these days. You can, of course, there's a good old-fashioned VLOOKUP formula. I know for a lot of people those can be challenging, but a VLOOKUP formula can hold you together if you've got lists on different pages. You can have data connections to each individual list and use VLOOKUPs to get information from one to the next to sort of aggregate the data that way. I encourage you deeply to look into Power Pivot and Power View. These tools are just amazing, and you can, if you've got an on-premises SharePoint site, in other words, you're not using SharePoint Online or Office 365, but you have SharePoint living on a server somewhere near you that you have access to, or your SharePoint admin has access to. There's a Power Pivot add-in for SharePoint that you can have set up, a service for SharePoint that allows you to publish these rich workbooks up to SharePoint and allows other users to access them in their browser, even if they don't have these add-ons installed for Excel. So really encourage you to look into these things. And there's a new tool called Data Explorer. Now it's just in preview. It's for Excel, and it is also just smoking and something you really, if you're needing to connect disparate data sources, something you want to look into. If you are an admin in your, you do some heavy IT lifting in your organization, look into Data Explorer. You can set up data sources for your users and expose them so that you've got business users who can access data sources without getting into trouble. Again, it's in preview, but these are things to Google, look up, get them installed, and check them out. So, but that's not why we're here, is today we're going to talk about some more enterprise type of things that we can do with our SharePoint list data. So SQL reporting services. You can use SharePoint lists for data sources. You don't have to install, sorry for the acronym, BIDS, which is Business Intelligence Design Studio. That's the kind of de facto Visual Studio tool set for doing reports that are SQL reports. But SharePoint has the report builder available. That may also be configuration specific. So if you can't find a report builder in SharePoint and you're not the SharePoint admin, talk to your SharePoint admin about that. So you can use a click once version of report builder. It allows you to put things together. If you're data savvy, you've done some work in Excel, maybe you've done some stuff with Access. You don't necessarily have to have spent your life as a SQL DBA to get pretty comfortable pretty fast with building reports in SSRS, SQL reporting services. So this is another option. Enterprise level stuff, scalable. You can subscribe to these. That is eye-opening for some people, especially if you're dealing with an organization that has been pushing Excel workbooks around. That is one of the problems with Excel. You can end up with these little islands. Everybody has their own version of the report. Not so great. But with SSRS, you can set up subscriptions. You can push things out to people via email. That's good stuff. And then finally, the topic of today is Performance Point. Performance Point Services is and it's part of SharePoint 2010. Again, it's a service that has to be, up and running. Requires a little configuration. I've included in an overview document that'll come with the other webinar materials. I've included some links, but if you're TechNet savvy, hop on TechNet. You can find the information you need to get it set up or to point your SharePoint admin to. The coolness of Performance Point is, of course, you're going to have your Performance Point dashboard. You can create a number of items aside from dashboards, but at its heart, you can create these dashboards where you can put these discrete items together in one place, and then you publish it up. Your user sees it as a web page. So you've got one version of this item that's up for everybody to look at. You don't have to worry about these multiple types of reports floating around, right? It's really reusable. The items you create in a content library can be reused in various workspaces. We're going to take a look at the designer so that you can see it and get a sense of what's going on. You can connect the items in a page. Dashboards are made up of pages. You can have multiple pages in a dashboard, so it gives you some nice fluidity. If you've used Report Builder for SSRS before, the dashboard designer should look and feel somewhat similar. It should be comfortable for you. I hadn't really used SQL Report Builder. I've always used Business Intelligence Design Studio. So for me, the interface was a little perplexing at first, but it's not. The interface isn't. It's not ridiculous. It's not like unlearnable or anything like that. So it's got some serious pros. Using SharePoint security allows you to create multiple key performance indicators for each scorecard. You can create scorecards, key performance indicators, different types of reports and charts. You can also include existing SQL reporting service reports on these. So if you already have been using SSRS and you have a library of RDL files, SQL report files, you've got all these reports you've already done, you can add them to dashboards, which means you can create these like wicked cool little layouts where you've got 4 different reports and you can use a filter to pass parameters between them, things like that. So keep in mind that your investment in SQL reporting services reports can be leveraged in Performance Point, okay? It allows for user-defined filtering. It has this system of time intelligence to allow you to deal with kind of date-time data more easily, so you don't have to write formulas to get out just stuff for a particular year, things like that. And different items on the dashboard can refresh individually without the whole page requiring a refresh, and we'll take a look at that so you can see what I mean there. And here come the cons. And I found that gathering documentation together on this, I found it challenging. It was difficult to sort out. Some of it is because in 2007, SharePoint, Performance Point was kind of a slightly different beast. And then in 2010, it got integrated. So you have to be a little specific in your search terms to make sure you're looking at stuff for the right version. You know, some tools aren't available if you're working with tabular data. Apparently, what this rocks most for is analysis cubes. Okay, and you can create, sorry, your eyes are glazing over, she said analysis cubes. You can create these using Power Pivot. So just some keywords for you to look into when you go Google for some of this stuff is using Power Pivot as a cube for SharePoint lists. And so if you've got Power Pivot services set up on your SharePoint server, you can create a cube that way that you can consume in Performance Point. Just something to know about. And one thing I did notice is that apparently there's some rumors circulating about the future of the product, and we see that all the time with all different Microsoft products. You know, people get invested and then they get concerned, and the only thing we ever know for a fact, I think, is that technology grows and changes, and so, you know, you got to kind of, if you're going to do tech, you got to kind of be willing to ride those rapids a little bit. However, the team blog for the product hasn't been touched in 8 months, so when I see a post on a Microsoft team blog for a product that says, hey, rumors of our demise, not so true, and then nothing gets updated for 8 months, it does make me a little nervous. And I found the learning curve a little steep. Your mileage may vary. It may be for you, you'll touch this product and you'll find it very natural. I had some struggles just kind of getting into it and getting the swing of it. So if you try it and you struggle, understand you are not alone, because I certainly did. And that's why we wrote up the documentation that we're providing with this webinar is very much just kind of getting started stuff, so you can go ahead and skip some of the navigation problems I had at the beginning. So moving on here to our demo portion, let me just pop open a few things here, and let's see, hopefully you guys are going to be able to see my browser window there. I think I see it resolving here slowly but surely. Okay, I can see it now in the preview, so hopefully you can see it too. So in order to, let me roll back 1 second. Before we start looking at these dashboards, real quickly just to review, we have talked about dashboards in webinars before, and in the past we've used InfoPath Forms to build them. And so here's some samples of some dashboards built with InfoPath Forms. This one is an InfoPath form that is using secondary data connections to some SharePoint lists in order to kind of provide this. It's sitting inside of a form web part, right, and just has kind of a little plus or minus sort of a scenario here. And here's another little InfoPath form dashboard sitting inside of a web part. And this one uses DBXL to query back for specific items in a database, so it's using a database instead of a list. So dashboards are something we've talked about before. We've used InfoPath Forms for them. And of course, that is one way to do some dashboard style reporting. Now, if we want to work with Performance Point, the first thing we have to do is we have to create a Business Intelligence Center site. And so you would go to the site that you wanted your BI site underneath, and you'd click New Site. You'd wait for the gallery to load. That's why I'm not clicking it, because we don't want to wait for that. You'd wait for the gallery to load, and you'd select Business Intelligence Center. If you don't have that template, then you've got to do some configuration on your SharePoint server to make sure that you've got those available. Talk to your admin, or if you are the admin, head off to TechNet and get the information you need. Here's a Business Intelligence Center site. I just left the homepage as is, and by default you end up with a library for dashboards, a library for data connections, a regular library in which I put a folder for my SQL report, and you end up with this library for Performance Point content. The Performance Point content library is where your Performance Point specific items are saved, and it automatically versions as you save things. You can set a person responsible and so forth. Your dashboard library is where your dashboards end up, and then you can open these up and open up the pages themselves, and then that brings you to your dashboards. So for this, I've got two very simple dashboards. One thing I did mention that in the cons. I think I mentioned it in the cons. One thing I found problematic with Performance Point was I did not find an easy way to connect to SharePoint lists. So here I've got expense categories and expense items, and I've got three things in this dashboard. This budget is a Performance Point scorecard. So this was designed in Performance Point. Expense with target is a SQL report. So this is an SSRS report. I'm using the new lookup functionality in SSRS 2008 R2 plus a code snippet to aggregate my items up here in my actual. I'm using the two lists I'm using. One is a category list and the other is the expense items themselves. And then I've got my items here, and you can see how this is refreshing. It's loading, but the other two items are not. And so this will pop up with the items. This right down here, this details, is key performance indicator details, and we can select a cell here and it'll update, and it's going to show information about that KPI. So you can add a little KPI details in order to get more information about a particular KPI. You know, it's off target, why it's off target, some information about it here, and so forth. And then over here is another very simple dashboard. This doesn't have any SQL reports in it. I am just using my orders list from my Northwind site, and right here I'm using time intelligence in order to be able to group together the items for a certain year. I've set some hard-coded targets. This again is in the documents we've put together on this, and again I've set up a KPI details. So here's kind of some very simplistic getting started sort of dashboards that you can put together, but let me show you how you can open up the workspace and the dashboard designer. Where I start, you can start here. You need to start in the Performance Point content library, and you can start here under New Item, and you can select a specific item, or if you click Add New Item, you'll create a blank workspace. A workspace is a collection of items, and they can be existing items or new items. So I've got a couple workspaces here that I've already got open, and this one was for my little demo dashboard. Now when we open up a workspace, it creates this DDWX is what the file extension is, and you can see here it shows right off our Performance Point content. The nice thing here is it makes it super easy to add existing items. So if I wanted to add something that I didn't already have here, I just select it and add item. Adding it to the workspace just basically says, please associate this item with this workspace. If I make changes to it, it's going to save them. The library by default has versioning turned on, making it very easy to change things back. And if you include person responsible information, then you'll know whose things you are changing accidentally, should that be the case. And then the Workspace tab shows me the things that are already in my workspace. One thing to note is on a right click on any option or any item, you've got some choices here. One is delete and the other is remove from workspace. Delete means delete, and that includes from SharePoint, okay? And so that's not just taking it out of your workspace. Remove from workspace takes it out of your workspace. So just kind of something to note. Each item has, you can see, it has its own little tabs of things you can address and modify. We go through, in the documents, we go through a certain amount of these things, but worth noting, since I did bring it up, and then we'll wrap up for questions, worth noting is in your data connections, you can set up this idea of time dimensions so that you can use time intelligence. And in this one, for example, I've selected order date, and I've said that I'm interested in the year in order date. So when I go and create my scorecard, and it's going to update here, one option I have in my named sets is order date year. And you can see I've got some built-in options here with current year and all. Another thing that I'm going to note really quickly is over here in the Edit tab in your scorecard is this Update button. I found consistently when I was dragging things onto this screen and changing things here that I was expecting things to happen right away. And they don't happen right away. You don't see the results of your operation right away. Clicking the Update button or saving will refresh this screen for you so you can see it. Finally, a dashboard. Let's take a quick look at one of those. So here's my orders dashboard. You pretty much have to look at it in the browser to see what it's going to look like, right? We can see I've got my orders here. I've got my KPI details here. I've created a connection between my orders and my KPI details, and if we look back over here, that's the connection that's providing this. But you can see in the dashboard itself, I'm not seeing any preview. I have to actually go to the page in order to be able to see what's going on there. So that is kind of a speedy tour of Performance Point. I encourage you to check it out, to take a look. Scorecards and dashboards can be a great way to sort of surface important information about data to people who need to see it. I really was excited about the ease of integration with SQL reports. So if you have SQL reports in your org, having a way to kind of compile those in something attractive. You know, everybody likes bright, shiny, new. The way to put those together in dashboards, that high level of reusability, I found all of that to be very compelling. At the same point in time, you know, there's some learning curve there. It's not impossible. It's just there's like any new tool, there's going to be some learning curve. And I'm going to go ahead and hand over to Alyssa quickly, and then we'll move on to questions.
Thanks, Hilary. So before we get to questions, I just kind of wanted to go over with you guys what else we have to offer at Qdabra besides just these weekly webinars. So first of all, we have a great community, InfoPathDev.com. So if you haven't visited there, definitely go check it out. This is a free support forum, and we guarantee a 90% response rate to posted questions. And we also have other learning materials, such as blogs, product information, and downloads as well. And if you're looking for a more urgent response, we also offer pay-as-you-go support. And so that's a different option if you don't want to wait for that response from the community. We take on consulting work as well. So if you have a project that you need assistance with, definitely let Qdabra know. Along with all these services, we also have great tools and templates to help jumpstart your projects, and also a great web service, DBXL. We offer training courses for different levels of experience, and we offer these both online and in person, just depending on your preference. And our next training session will be on June 10th through the 14th, and that's an online course. So if you need more information, definitely let me know. This is a slide just a little bit more about what our classes have to offer. So definitely check it out and let us know if you're interested.
Thanks, Alyssa. Okay, well, if anybody has any questions, now would be the time to ask, and I will just check the little questions box. If not, oh, I think I see a question. And it's a long one. Hang on just a second, because I have to, embarrassingly enough, figure out how to use this interface. And what do I find? The question is, what do you find is the most common reporting tools that company are using with SharePoint? I assume that it would be SSRS and Excel. Can you comment on what is the most commonly used? Yeah, I am one of those tentative folks who really hesitates to make universal statements. So it's going to be hard to get me to say, oh, this is the way, this is what's most commonly used. However, I would say that what I see personally is a lot of ad hoc reporting is done with Excel, enterprise reporting is done with SSRS. There are reasons for this. SSRS makes admins more comfortable. I'm more comfortable, and it makes me more comfortable. I'm more comfortable with SSRS, with SQL reporting services, because I know when you render that report that you cannot change any of the data. Excel makes me uncomfortable on some levels, and that is because I know that even if you have a link to this data item that you've pulled down, you can change the data in that Excel file. So let's say you initially started out with a query to a SharePoint list and you've pulled down all that SharePoint list data. You know, as long as nobody clicks the refresh button and gets the latest data from the SharePoint list, you can just have at it. You can type over whatever you want. You can make that chart say anything, right? And so there's that, I guess I have a little bit of network admin running through my bloodstream, because there's that little piece of me that is uncomfortable with the ability to modify data that you find in things like Excel. So renderers like SQL reporting services, anything that puts stuff into PDF, you know, those are the kinds of solutions I'm more comfortable with. However, there is a huge place for Excel reporting. There is a huge place for things like Power Pivot and so on, because it does allow users to do this kind of ad hoc, pivoty, look at whatever they want, look at whatever they need to, figure out on the fly how the data works together. You know, those are things that I feel are super important, but it just is a challenge sometimes. Okay, so I see that there are more questions here and that I hadn't gotten to the top of the questions list. So let me start towards the beginning. We have a question that says, is it possible to create custom views from InfoPath 2010 forms to a SharePoint 2007 MOS site collection and get all data in a query data collection of multiple SharePoint form libraries based on a state condition between start and end date? Well, that's a complicated question, and my answer would be I am not sure. The thing is SharePoint Designer, even in 2007, is a pretty powerful tool because you can work directly with the XSLT. You know, in XSLT, there's a lot of things you can do. So my gut instinct would be that, yeah, absolutely you can do that, right? Because you've got access to the different libraries and lists. You definitely can create conditions in XSLT, but probably my first approach there would be to dig into the XSLT, and that's not something everybody's comfortable with, frankly. Is the SharePoint report builder the same thing as SSRS, or are these two different things, was another question. Well, okay, so report builder in SharePoint is used to create RDL files, and SQL reporting services renders RDL files. Okay, and so you have to have, in order to use RDL files, pretty much, you have to have SQL reporting services installed. Report Builder provides your users who aren't installing Visual Studio or Business Intelligence Design Studio, right? It provides them with a tool that looks a lot like that dashboard designer to build reports. I don't know offhand if you can create your own data sources in Report Builder. My instinct is that you can only use data sources that already exist in a library. For some reason, I believe this to be true, so you guys are welcome to go learn more about that and let me know if I was incorrect. The thing is, with Report Builder, what you want to do is you want to make sure that somebody who understands the way the data joins, has created these data models already. And the reason for that is, especially if you are working with, oh, let's just say, a J.D. Edwards system that's running on a DB2 database, you're talking a cajillion records that join in some truly interesting and non-intuitive ways. Anybody out there who's touched this stuff is laughing right now. And so, you know, when we look at complicated data, but we have this fantastic business analyst who totally understands what they need to look at. Sometimes Report Builder can be great because you can already have your data models set up and they can consume them. So they don't have to understand the joins. You're just getting them the data in a presentation they get. Is it possible, somebody else has asked, is it possible to change the date time of the modified field from date time to date? No. SharePoint doesn't actually have any date data types, to the best of my knowledge. To the best of my knowledge, SharePoint only uses date time data types. So you can change the display, but you're not going to be able to change the data type. Do all of the data sources need to be under the BI site? You know, from what I've seen in the workspace designer, when you create that new workspace, everything you're going to use needs to be under that site. I'm not seeing any real, we're going to pop it up and take a look. Fantastic question. Right, so if we go here, you can see this is really, well, you can't see that because you haven't investigated my SharePoint site structure. But if we look here, I can assure you that all of these are in a single data connection library underneath the site that I open the dashboard from. So again, you know, my instinct here is going to be, since my add items capability is only from here. Now I do have an import items, but that says add items from a workspace file to the SharePoint list and document libraries. So my assumption is everything's going to need to be in the same BI site. So when you create these, everything you need is going to need to be in the same BI site, and that's a very good question. Somebody else asked whether we can integrate KPIs and dashboards and InfoPath Forms. Whew, that is an interesting question. My instinct, you guys, I'm so sorry I keep saying my instinct is, but this is kind of what we're going on here, because if I don't know the answer, I'm certainly not going to pretend to. My thought is no. The reason I'm hesitating is because, you know, we can, in an InfoPath form, we can display an image, and you can get pretty tricksy with the links to that image. But these things are not images, right? They're ASPX, and I do not believe there is a way to integrate it with the InfoPath form. I think if I were going to try to research that, what I would look into is whether there's any kind of a web service associated with performance point services, and whether or not there's any way to access that. For example, with Excel services, you can leverage the REST services to pull in a picture of a chart into your InfoPath form, and that can be using Excel REST. That can be very similar to having an actual chart. Where is the SQL database running, in the cloud or on-prem? It's easy to get to the DB for reporting. So in this case, I'm not actually using SQL for any of my stuff. I've been using SharePoint lists, right? Because I was doing kind of, my little demo is on SharePoint lists with reporting options. As far as SQL goes, you know, my SQL report was actually reporting on a SharePoint list. My assumption would be any SQL report that you are capable of running after it's been published to a SharePoint site that has integrated reporting services, you would be able to display in your dashboard. So that would be something to check out there, would be, can I publish up this report and open it up from SharePoint? Like if we go look at, whoa, sorry, clicked the wrong thing. If we go take a look, 1 second, I'm having technical difficulties. There we go. If we go take a look at my reports here, I published up my RDL that I created in here, and I also did some other testing that was not, and I've got both of my RDLs because I'm using a subreport. I've got them both here, and so I can kind of verify that I can access this, you know, simply by opening it here in the browser. And so my thought is, as long as you've got your reports somewhere that you can pop it open and you're getting your data back, everything's successful, then you should be able to use it in your dashboard. Okay, and let's see what else we've got here. Most common reporting, I already got to that. Yeah, so somebody else asked and said that they do not see a BI site template when adding a site, and they're a farm admin, and they assume it must be deployed. Is performance point similarly something that needs to be enabled, deployed? Yeah, it's a service. You need to make sure the service is running. So the first thing to check is probably under central admin. Make sure you've got the feature enabled, right, and go from there. And what you want to search for is performance point services, and SharePoint 2010, since 2007 was pretty different from 2010, so you want to make sure you pop up there. Next person asked, what is the best resource to utilize when you have InfoPath errors? Oh, why wouldn't a form open in a web browser even when it's selected to do? The best resource for that, if you are not a SharePoint admin, is to bake cookies for your SharePoint admin and get them to give you the log files. That is the only way I have found to really successfully track down SharePoint web form browser issues, is to dig into the log files. They're terrifying, they're frightening, they're horrible, but at the same point in time they have the information you need. So force the error, make it happen, go click the button and make sure the form is failing, i.e. opening in filler instead of browser, or if the issue is occurring on publish, you need to go find the log files for that time, and it can help you learn more about what's going on. Fiddler is also a good tool if you're publishing and having a problem there. Okay, and the next one, does the publishing feature services have to be active? Yes, this is a publishing site. You like the way I'm so confident about that. Yeah, let's take a look here. If we go look at our performance point content and we look at our available libraries, yes, library system library was created by the publishing feature. Okay, so yes, that's a definite. And the next one is, when I try to add an item, it just asks me to upload. When I try to add an item, it just asks me to upload. If I try to upload into dashboards and data connections, yeah, so it's, you know, real quick, we just start here at performance point content, and this is where I start, is right here, add new item, and then it opens up the dashboard designer for me. I can create my data connections from there. Okay, so that is a great place to start, is right here, and then you can create your items here, and then you can go on from there. That looks like we've hit about the end of the questions for everybody who has powered through to here. This is great. One last thing to show you. I know I was going on and on about things like Power Pivot and Power View. Slicers, if you haven't looked at them, these are a fantastic way to be filtering things. They look good. They look clean. Power View, should have clicked that button earlier. It's opening up the Power View sheet. Power View sheets can provide you with a really neat way in Excel to start kind of slicing and dicing your data and display it in different ways. So you can see right here I've got my employees by where their orders shipped to. It's just taking a second to render. Should have popped that open earlier. So like I said earlier, do check out Power Pivot and Power View for Excel for those types of ad hoc reporting solutions as well. And last one is a question on whether or not we have a solution for using an InfoPath web form in SharePoint Foundation extranet for anonymous login. Pop an email to sales at, Alyssa, is it sales at Qdabra.com? I'm pretty sure it's sales at Qdabra.com. Pop an email to us and somebody will be able to get back to you on that. I don't know offhand. Thanks, Ed. Okay, I think that's it. Thanks everybody for attending. I encourage you to look into these tools. I encourage you not to get discouraged if some of them feel a little tough to begin with. You know, it's like any new tool, it's hard. sometimes to get started, but you don't struggle alone. I assure you I struggled this week as well, kind of getting some of this put together. And reporting is an important piece of your data collection efforts. If your data is just sitting and nobody's able to make decisions on it, I mean, no offense to you, your data collections could be the best intended in the world, but it's worthless. Data's of no value if it just sits someplace and nobody can use it to learn anything. So get that data exposed, get it out there, and get some reports going. Thanks again, everyone. Have a fantastic week, and we'll talk to you soon. Next webinar is up on May 30th. Get us your feedback. We'll get you demo stuff and how-to stuff and some more links, and you can get rolling on this. Thanks a lot. Have a great